I understand. It's good to see you all, even if it's virtual.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'll go ahead. This link's fun. I'll hit this. We'll call you. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it not ready yet?
Still setting up. We're almost there.
Thank you,
I
Mary.
understand. It's good to see you all, even if it's virtual.
All right, now I will gavel in. Call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. I believe everyone knows each other. Welcome to have Jean with us from the Foundation Board. Thank you. It's going to be a little bit of a different meeting, obviously, because I'm talking and we don't have a quorum, so we can't take action on anything, but we will get some informational updates. So we can't do approval minutes with no quorum. Table that until May, so will we have minutes for this meeting to approve?
We'll have meeting minutes for both this meeting and November.
You might have seen this already in email, but Joe's going to schedule Zooms next week with absent members to catch them up.
The fact that nothing happened.
I guess maybe just on what we talked about, or really what we need to get done next meeting.
Things going on.
There was some board activity in Richmond earlier in the week. Lisa, Mark, and myself attended with staff, and I thought it was quite productive and very efficient. Maryzel, thank you for the very organized way you put together all of our meetings. Most of the information, at least my team was on about the budget, was promising. You know, there were a few folks that mentioned there was some activity this weekend with the budget that we might want to pay attention to.
Yeah, Hayden received some information using a contact to communicate with one of our delegates. Basically just says he was going to check the budget amendment for the museum. The House budget will be introduced Sunday at 1 p.m. and the Senate at 4. Both will go into committee conference to work out the differences. The positive thing so far is that during this first part for crossover, there was no movement to change any of our projects within the Secretary of Education. So far, so good.
Yes, and I'll just add on to that to say that some of the folks that we met with, whether they were legislators or aides, mostly indicated that we didn't have to be worried about on that front.
Did I hear on the news yesterday that somewhere 14 million circle?
I don't know what the exact number is, but yes, due to a number of factors, with COVID and so forth, there are a lot of extra funds rolling around. On top of that, I may as well just bring it up. The Secretary reached out 2 days ago or 3 days ago or so, whatever it was, but they asked for agencies to provide projects that have anything to do peripherally with infrastructure, which doesn't just have to do with roads and bridges, but informational platforms and distribution of knowledge. And so the curators provided a vast amount of project language that we don't know if it'll fit or not. We decided just to go ahead and provide it. We also put in there Waynesboro Canopy Walk Pavilion, you name it. We threw basically everything we had that any kind of connection to infrastructure, whether it's physical or informational. And so that was submitted to the Secretary yesterday. They said that there would be Virginia should be getting around $5 billion from the Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act, and that there would be $180 billion in discretionary grants that the mission of the secretaries in Virginia will be to obtain as much of that as possible. So more to come on that.
Some potential right there.
Yeah, we put our hand out. So
That's the way to do it. So those of us that were in Richmond, we were very familiar with some of the highlights of these projects in the budget, but just to mention them, the Early Childhood Learning Center, an educator, that's a project here I believe we talked about before, converting the library into a early childhood space. Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab Tech, which sounds interesting. I'm not as familiar with that. And then a trades technician with training in green tech associated with all the, I guess, green stuff we're doing here at the facility with the charging station and the solar array. Anything else you want to add to?
We'll, in the Research and Collections Committee report, we'll hear a little bit more from Dr. Bassett, and then the second week on the monitoring lab technician. And then the trades technician will basically we just have so much more going on building wise, and we just thought it would be nice to get somebody with specific training or somebody who we could send to training that can do the normal trades tech jobs that we have traditionally done here at VMNH, but could also incorporate the updated HVAC, the solar array, and other capacities that we're adding with the ESCO project that Jonathan will get an overview on shortly.
Well, we'll move on to the chairman's report. Portion is not here. I will just note that there is in process scheduling of a retreat for the board, May 20th and 21st at JMU, with details to follow. And then the only other thing I wanted to quickly mention, I just thought of it before the meeting. We do have a couple of new board members and that does affect committee assignments too. So just be aware that hopefully they'll be coming on board in person here in the next few meetings. Treasurer's report, I believe Jonathan will talk us through some of that.
All in all, our current budget is nothing much new there going on. Everything, all the numbers look in line. You can tell that the festivals picked up, driven by our revenues. Grab a few more of those this fiscal year, so that'll get our revenues in line with the estimates. Costs look right in line where we need to be. Some projects that are we'll speak about projects in the facilities portion. There's some costs for equipment that'll be traded off. Right now, it's a little high. There's going to be trade off for some compressor fans and a motor in one of the chillers. So those costs will be traded off later on. That number will go down. Generally, right in line with where we need to be this time of year. Excited about the next 2 fiscal years. Appreciate everybody going to Richmond and speaking with the delegates. We got some raises on the table, which all the staff are quite excited about for both fiscal years, see if those stay in the budgets. New positions, cultural heritage, and the early childhood learning. They've been installed those earlier. Happy to answer any questions.
The budget seems to be, as Jonathan alluded to, just fine. There are some areas where we're a little ahead on spending, some areas where we're way behind on spending. I'll just bring one up with at 19% in tiny font here. 19% in expenses, about the 5th line down on equipment. Just how it is. We just haven't had a need. In fact, that stems, I do believe, from the past fiscal year where expenses were so low for operation that we actually managed to get staff what they need. So there just haven't been a lot of requests. So we've been kind of shifting money around to balance out some of the areas where we're a little ahead on spending.
Any other questions on the treasurer's report?
Can you speak to utilities at all? I saw that that's a little bit high, but and I know we're not yet seeing some of the consequences of the energy stuff that was out there.
Correct. Utilities are a bit high, but well, they're marginally high. They're running the testing force on the equipment, so they're doing the forced air. They're having to run that for several cycles while they're doing HVAC. But in general, this is probably a month ahead, so we're catching an extra month.
Oh, I
So
see.
we're 1 month in because June last year is in this fiscal year, so it looks like it's about a month ahead of where, and it'll even up by the end of this year.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move into Joe's executive director report.
Just so, as you might hear through the doors over here, for those of you online, it sounds like we got a little crowd of children behind the doors where the lecture hall here. Our attendance has been picking up. We, of course, have gone back to the idea of running festivals. We don't quite see the numbers in attendance for a general day or festivals as much as we used to, though one thing I do want to point out is that thanks to a gift from Cooper Furniture, we have shifted our EBT card entry program, which is the Museums for All program, from paying $1 to get in to basically free admission for yourself and your family. And we've seen rather noticeable pickup in the use of that. So we're certainly not losing anything out of that thanks to the gift of furniture locally here. But at the same time, too, it's just very nice to see people taking advantage of that. As far as some of our major projects, we're going to be touching on them as far as our capital projects and so forth. We're going to talk about in specific committee reports facilities as far as the Genus Adams Education Pavilion and the VMNH Waynesboro Campus and the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee report. However, I do want to bring one up that's a bit of an opportunity here, and I mean, I know we can't vote on things and so forth, but at the same time, too, I just want to get the information out there. You recall from our strategic plan, we were supposed to, during this 5-year period, explore the feasibility and the possibilities behind creating a canopy walk that would originate at the Genus Adams Pavilion out back, and then extend it to Wilson Park and kind of go from there. So it's something that was well received by the community, received supportive information from the board. However, we have an opportunity that's cropped up. So first of all, I want to thank Mark Buss and Lisa Murder from the board and Jennifer Thomas from the VMNH Foundation Board, who have volunteered to begin to assemble energy to make visits to other canopy walks, which there are a few on the eastern United States. I got a call from the city, and they have a pile of ARPA money, American Rescue Plan. So they help me out. The Act, yes, American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and they kind of surprised me. I knew they were always supportive about the pavilion, and 6 or 8 months ago, they said they may have an angle to help us out with it. So of course, I was all ears. There were no specifics at that time. They called and said they would like to invest into the canopy walk. I have not had the discussion about how much they want to invest, but I would not be surprised if it would be a multi-million-dollar gift. I don't know that for sure, but the possibility lays in that area. Looking at the costs of other canopy walks, and this is extremely rough. So please, I reserve the right to edit this down the line, but to do a canopy walk of the size we're talking about, roughly a bridge, whatever the distance is across Oakdale Avenue, to a roughly 1,000-foot walkway around the canopy of Wilson Park, we're talking somewhere around $12 million. So that said, we also have Local Harvest Foundation, which is aware of our interest in the project, as well as Tobacco Commission. They're aware. On top of that, which I couldn't begin to talk about capacity, we did have the Appalachian Regional Commission officers visit us right before the pandemic and brought them to speed. They loved the idea. They don't, at the time, they didn't know what, if anything, they could do, but they're another possibility. So what I'm going to propose over the next quarter, with Mark's help, as well as with Lisa and Jennifer, Mark, would you like to talk about your potential conversations? Yes, please.
I'm having a discussion with the executive director of the Vermont Institute of Natural Science, who they have a beautiful walk that they constructed 2 years ago. He seems very open to talk about all the costs, all the things that they found, all the pitfalls in the process, right? Because that's where you get hung up. So I told him when I came out of this meeting this weekend that I formulated a list of questions for him and then have a conversation. And that is in dire contrast to conversations I tried to have with some other places like that in Atlanta. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to learn from someone that's just finished one of these. So we look forward to that. And then there was one other one as well we're pursuing. But that one is the most likely to mirror what we're trying to get at with the size or stuff.
I would agree with you, Lynn. It's very seldom. Would you like to talk about the wilds?
Yeah.
Sure. We're also looking at modeling our project off of the Wild Center, which is in the Adirondacks of upstate New York. And I have a past coworker who's previously worked there, and she's president of the executive director, so hopefully we can get some insights from them as well.
It's a little older. Gosh, I can't remember.
It's been around for a little while, but it's a really impressive facility. So hopefully we can get some good insights from them as well.
And if the board is interested, I don't remember the RFM, but I did at some point in the past more seasonal. You imagine upstate New York, people are going to be visiting there during the good weather, avoiding during the cold season, even though that trend continues. The canopy walk created a night and day, both a visitation and a revenue situation. Now, that said, they don't have a scientific team. So I see us having kind of a unique opportunity too, to cater ours, that's the right word to use. I mean, sure, it'll be open to the public. We'll have, hopefully platforms for classes to be had, or we can support events. That's all great. And it should be a wonderful addition to our revenue sources. But that said, since we have scientists such as, I can think of PAL stuff in particular. I don't know if Nancy and Mammals would, would have the same kind of opportunity that he would. But, I know from my limited time looking at canopy intersections, a quick aside, when I ran a lab in Cleveland, the technician in my lab, he literally shot bows and arrows up into trees and brought long tracks up 40 feet off the ground, and then ran identical tracks on the ground. And he found two completely different insect communities. So and we know that that's the case. That just touches the surface. But we could probably do a lot of stuff that really would add to our capacity and maybe even interest other scientists to come down here. So this has multiple ramifications. So the reason we're bringing all this up is just to ensure that, this is perhaps happen faster to get back that ARPA money. The city said they would have to have the money committed by 2024 and spent by 2026, right? So that ramps up the opportunity, and we have to think about capacity. But I think in the interim, we should be pulling together all the information we can about past construction projects, see how they relate to us. And the other thing, we need to have a conversation with the foundation. While I personally think in discussions with Jonathan, our BCCO, Certified Construction Officer, we could build a bridge across Oakdale and be responsible for that as a state entity. But then the foundation could be responsible for building the actual canopy walk, and if willing, obtaining things like insurance and so forth for it. And what that would do is it would, I think, provide some added flexibility for us, because there's not going to be another Virginia state project that is comparable, mirrored, you know what I'm trying to say, one that would follow this model. So I'm not saying either one of those directions is the way that we would ultimately go as an agency, but I think over the next quarter leading up to the retreat, we ought to gather as much information as possible. So Mark, thank you. Lisa, Jennifer, if you happen to be on, thank you. That's where we're at. So I'll open it up to anyone if you have any particular concerns or suggestions about our direction. Yes, sir.
Yeah, for what it's worth, when I traveled in the UK, I went to Kew Gardens and saw their tree canopy walk, and I took lots of pictures and video. I was especially impressed by the way that along the railings they had some of the interpretive signage and stuff, so I captured that. And I could share that with the committee and with Mark and anybody that might be interested in seeing those.
Sure, you can send it to me and I'll quarterback it out to everyone, or whoever.
I would be curious to know for the canopy walks that are established in the Northeast, if there's any consideration in emerald ash forests. Simply because depending on the woods that you're building the canopy over and the percentage of ash in those woods, it's going to change dramatically here in the next 10 years. Just along the James River, for example, they're cutting down ash trees left and right. And over time, other trees will take their place, of course. But like I said, it's just something to think about, that whatever vistas you think you might have, depending on the percentage of ash there, they will be gone. Not a matter of
Kind of like the old elm trees.
well, that, the American chestnut, they're all going the same way. It's not a matter of if, when. So I'm just curious to know if there's any consideration of that. Obviously, it doesn't impact the construction or anything else, but it might impact people's expectations, at least initially, when the trees start to go. And for the park here, I couldn't even tell you. I don't know if the city's ever done a tree survey. Maybe it's not an issue at all. There's 3 ash trees, and it's a small percentage of the canopy. But ash is a significant part of that part.
Ash is a beautiful tree. I love, of course, the chestnut.
Yeah, the ash will go very quickly. I mean, it's not something that once they're infested, they go within a year.
Or with Rhoda College, we did do a survey of the Wilson Park property. Most of it anyway. There are a couple areas towards the back that was undergrowth. The team wasn't able to really easily access. I don't have it memorized. I remember there were species of oak back there that I never heard of before, so that was kind of cool. But I'd like to send that to you, that you can look and see if there are any red flags. Tree species.
Of the park here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's just Fraxinus. I mean, there's just one species.
But there are other, like I've heard about, like beach blight.
Well, if we go down that road, it will be very depressing. There's something in the west that's coming east that's attacking oaks, and so if we get serious about that, then we might forget the whole thing. Plant pines or something out. But no, I'd be happy to look and see if there is a survey, just out of curiosity, what percentage for this one known thing. There's lots of unknowns, things that aren't here yet. I didn't want to spend it much time.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great consideration.
And I assume there would be some sort of an assessment that happens before anything actually gets.
Well, not necessarily for that.
Oh, really? That doesn't get.
No, you would be relying on somebody else taking an interest in just knowing what the tree species are in the park, which may or may not happen. Usually those are a low priority thing. But I'm just throwing that one thing out because depending on the percentage of forest cover that's in that park, it could make a difference aesthetically. Structurally, it has nothing to do with the
And-
walkway.
I don't know if they're doing this with the other, but the elm tree, there's a valley forge here that is blight resistant. And off of it or not, I asked the guy I bought mine from, but, and I know, I'm on the Investment Society and they're working on blight resistant tree.
Right. They're using a hybrid with an Asian species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope they do the same thing with that.
Well, as you see, we have kind of an interesting opportunity that kind of came up, maybe not quite out of the blue, but it was kind of close enough to it. So we'll keep everyone up to speed and we'll gather the information. As far as everything else goes, I think we're doing well. Again, the remainder of the reports on museum operation will come out of the committees. But I'm, personally, operationally, I could be happier at this moment. So I don't know if anyone wants to buy our acting chairman today another minute. Anybody have questions?
I'll only remark about the Kew Gardens treetop walkway. There was actually a snag along the walkway that was quite interesting to look at too. So a dead tree snag, and not the whole canopy should be that way, but it doesn't hurt the walkway to have something like that, because I think that a lot that goes on in the dead tree there can be interesting. Bird nesting and insect activity and all that, right?
Years ago, talking to a forester, he said 6 snags per acre is part of a healthy forest. So cool.
Yeah.
So I think I've concluded.
Sure. Thank you. We'll go on to facilities, and I know some of this has already been touched on, but Jonathan will present on the facility.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, sort of the top of the Douglas Street project, that's under contract, contractors, the spots were ordered. We are waiting on the security upgrade at our facility. Start bringing in the roofing materials, house them on site, keep them warm, so they can do the roofing. Gina Adams, Education Pavilion, emailed this morning, is talking with BGS and ready to go back out to bid for that one. You guys recall that it's the right size project. It's something we'll become familiar with as the Wakefield project is down the road. So that should be just another 30 days on EVA, and we'll get the bids in, be awarded, done. The ESCO project is well underway. We were talking a little bit about that earlier. Motors and fans being changed out on the chillers, and the lighting is also being there's a team in place to do the retrofits. A lot of those are switching out bulbs and LEDs for the uplighting. None of that has, as long as they don't change the wiring, it doesn't have to get PGS approved, so they're just going to move forward with that portion of the project. EV chargers, we're trying to find a conduit in the parking lot, see if we can find out when we run the wires to those. Department of DEQ has those on hand, so we just need to, once we get the wires in place, and run them, and it's right outside of Richmond warehouse, grab those. Do you want to cover Wayne's Road?
We can do that. We can do that for the advocacy committee report.
All right, good. Wayne's Road is right in line. KMU is helping us. We found them on as the project manager. Real nice guy, Rick. He's working with me pretty much daily to make sure that's all going. We've had interest from several lady firms. Lots of questions from just referring to the CPSM, state manual for projects of the nature. Lots of people asking about budget, which we cannot disclose. So it's exciting. I think it's at least eight hard inquiries from 8 different firms, several inquiries each.
So is the concept there, you don't want to just give them the number that they can target, or?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a design to build, so you want to try to hopefully get the best, they're trying to beat each other in the bid process. Sure. Get the lowest, best quality work for the lowest price.
And the money the state has given us doesn't just pay for that firm, but for instance, it will also pay for the construction manager as well. So yeah, it would be wise to, or best practices, I should say, to let them know how much money the state has.
Makes sense.
They can make a rough guess, sure, but
Yeah, there's a formula online. They were interested enough to look at square footage. Pop that out. The education, the early childhood learning center, that's a new one. That is a capital project that's going to be voted on here shortly. Pretty excited about that. Let's move that project forward probably 5 years. And allocate those funds from our budget analyst and the education department. Some other benefit of being education secretary.
what Jonathan was referring to there, assuming now that crossovers occurred, that we continue to survive the processes of the General Assembly. Fortunately, those dollars would go into an account that we don't have to spend out by the end of the fiscal year. So we can, I mean, there is a time limit, but at the same time too, it's not 365 days.
Right.
So we can work on that at appropriate pace. So we're looking kind of just behind the scenes of preparation, looking at the firms that we might want to work with in terms of helping us design and populate that with necessary materials.
Any questions?
Is that everything you guys want to cover for facilities?
I think so.
All right. Move over to research and collections with Art.
Okay, unfortunately, we didn't have a quorum, and of course, that coincides with a lot of business we might have accomplished with the nomination of 2 research associates and the renewal of 6 others, but that doesn't prevent them from everybody cooperating together and supporting museum research. But there were a couple of highlights. I just want to once again bring everyone's attention to the fact that the full research and collections report that Ben Williams puts together for us is in the board packet, and I urge everyone again to read through that thoroughly. I'm always embarrassed to sit here and try and encapsulate all the great things that our research, our curators are doing, because I could never do them justice, and so I won't attempt to. But I will bring a couple things that were discussed at our meeting. First and foremost, the museum has hired a new herpetologist. So this is big news. This is something that the museum has talked about for many years, and finally reality. And Dr. Ariana Kuhn is doing a postdoc currently in Alberta, and she will start here in the fall. And her work has been with the phylogenetics of reptiles, primarily in Madagascar. but she sees an opportunity to switch her research to looking at salamanders here in Appalachia, which is one of the world's hotspots for salamanders. We often think that, here in the United States, the best places for animal research is somewhere else, but for crawfish and for salamanders, among other things, freshwater mussels, the hotspot's right here in our backyard. So it would be great to see her as part of the museum family. Petra is still in progress and being meticulously prepared. There are some challenges because of mineral deposits associated with the skeleton, and apparently they've impacted parts of the bone structure of the skeleton itself, so it's very slow work. And but what's exciting is, among other things, is that there are other microfossils, bones that are associated with the remains, and apparently there is a bat skull within the nasal cavity of Petra. So there's just enough exposed there to know something's up. There's some imaging that's going to take place that might reveal some more things, but it still won't be a clear look at that. Also, there's been some really great media interest in research that's going on that includes museum researchers. Probably one of the big ones that came along was the true millipede. Some of you may have heard about this. I mean, it was in the popular media. What I mean by a true millipede is, millipede literally means 1,000 feet, but up to this point, I think 600 pairs of feet was about it, maybe 700. But now they've actually found a millipede in a mine shaft, deep mine shaft in Australia that exceeded 1,000 legs. So this is a big deal. It's a new taxon, and Dr. Jackson Means was part of that research paper. So being that this museum and there's a millipede researcher at Virginia Tech at Blacksburg, this is kind of a millipede hotspot. There were a couple of interesting reports on millipedes this past quarter. Because Dr. Hayden Bassett is with us here today, I've asked him to just take a few minutes to talk about the kickoff of one of his exciting research projects, and also to bring us up to date on some interest, media interest in one of his projects as well.
I promise I'll keep this one brief. The kickoff, the exciting kickoff, is the Smith River Survey, which I've spoken about for several board meetings now. That's the archaeological survey focused on this area, the Smith River Valley, looking at specifically at late woodlands, so 1250 AD to 1450 AD. Village sites, Native American village sites up and down the Smith River. We have about 7 or 8 major known village sites just right here in our own backyard. And this generous funding from National Park Service is going to allow us to do new excavations into those sites for 2 reasons. One is, the primary reason, is to see what the integrity of those sites are. They were first identified decades ago, I believe 1960s, 70s by Richard Bradley. But as you know, Smith River, as most areas, has been subjected to a lot of annual flooding, rapidly increasing in recent years. And so our question is, do these sites actually still survive? Or still survive in a way in which there's scientific value in studying them and preserving them? So we will answer that question, but we will also take the opportunity to ask our own research questions while we're excavating into the village sites. So the kickoff for that project is actually next month. There's been some COVID-related delays in the grant forwarding process, but that's finally coming to a conclusion. We will get started in March. Beyond that, another big exciting news is with the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab. There has been an increasing demand for research and services of this lab. And just a reminder to everyone, this is a lab housed here at Virginia Smith Natural History, focused on monitoring cultural heritage, both in Virginia and worldwide, that's impacted by climate change and worldwide by armed conflict. The recent services we've provided to largely federal government entities have included the State Department. We've lended our services in satellite imagery analysis to help support the signing or renewal of a bilateral agreement between the State Department and the government of Mali last month. Right now, we are currently engaged in Ukraine, assisting the State Department with identifying archaeological sites that are vulnerable and perhaps soon to be impacted in Ukraine. We're working on that on a daily basis. And the budget item, if that's appropriate to include here, the budget item that was mentioned for the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab, given the amount of demand that's being placed on the lab, we saw the need for at least one more staffer in the lab to support that type of analysis, because it is a very manual process right now. So that's what that budget item is. The exciting news surrounding all of that is actually, I had an interview with the New York Times this past week on the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab, and they're actually going to send a photographer down in the coming weeks, maybe next week or the week following, just to make that a very visual story as well. So that we'll receive some good press for a very wide audience there.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So as you can see, there's a lot going on, and we've only skipped the surface. All of the curators have been incredibly productive with publishing important papers and in the process of preparing papers for submission. So again, I direct everyone to the reports in your packets. Thank you.
Development Marketing Committee, I don't see Ryan.
I'll just walk through a couple of points in his advancement report. The numbers are reflective on page 1 of advancement report that we are getting more people and more revenues. The trend continues that people who are attending are spending more money per visit than back in 2019. But the numbers are still not recovered all the way, but the trend is going in the right direction. So we're happy with that. On page 2 of the advancement report, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, the revenues are just looking really good, both, in terms of our O2 or revenue that we earn here, or donations and other support generated by the foundation. And it's really going along quite well here. I mean, we always kind of expect success, but we also try to temper that with reality. It's pretty good. So it's very comfortable for the staff. I know the foundation is very pleased. So Gene, thank you, on behalf of the museum for all the foundation's doing for us. Including, if you look on page 2, the endowment is doing really well. So it's continuing to grow. So over the past year, it grew from 688,000 to 789,000. So yeah, the percentage growth is good. Stifel, the local investment portfolio firm that's been with the museum for a long time, has done really well. The Richard Hoffman Foundation, even though I don't have the numbers broken down here, it originally started out as 100,000 to raise more money for it, and then let that court just kind of build. I forget what the number is, but I think it's about 50% ahead of where it started. And so Cal will be drawing some money off of the revenue generated from that investment specifically for invertebrates. So we talked about how that might be used. On top of that, the Pete Kenneco Memorial Fund kind of had a hiatus on that. Quick history lesson here. Bill Kenneco and his wife Mary Jane, well before COVID, had invested $100,000 in essentially a fund that would help support graduate student research in natural history, particularly the geological sciences in the Commonwealth. And so we were able to fund one project before COVID hit. So we kind of let it build, and it's done well. We're going to, Ben has already set up a committee to review proposals. We'll be absorbing them this spring, and we'll be awarding to 2 graduate students in the state of Virginia. Were they $3,500?
I believe it was 3,000.
3,000? Okay, so we're going to award you $3,000 grants to support graduate student work. And that will also allow that course to continue to grow. So I think we're doing real well there. Everything else is looking pretty good in terms of advancement. For whatever reason, during the pandemic, we're seeing a higher percentage of out-of-state visitors this past year, or the past 6 months really, than we had seen prior to COVID. So I think more and more people, this is just anecdotal, but I think they're learning about us as a tweener institution. That is, we are on the way to wherever they're ultimately going, the beach or wherever. We're right in between the destination and where they want to stay overnight, taking advantage of us. And the festivals continue to draw very strongly, particularly from North Carolina, obviously, but we have West Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, and whatnot. So the advancement activities are looking really good.
Anybody have any questions? Now we'll let him continue with the education of public programs.
Christy wanted me to point out 3 things. They did not have a meeting. Court has had scheduled surgery, so couldn't join us. Christy, unfortunately, she tested negative, but still kind of came down ill at the end of the week. So she asked me to point on 3 different points here in the education report. You can look at the numbers yourself. Obviously, they're way better than last year, and we're continuing distance learning work, which was popular during the height of the pandemic, but continues to be useful. On page 3 of her report, we procured 4 hydroponic growing units for her homeschool science and engineering academy, and they're being well used. So they are actually growing in a sort of vertical farming program. It's modest in size, but it's effective. They're growing lettuces and spices and whatnot that the students will actually grow, harvest. They're studying the impact of different manipulations of growing conditions in these units and so forth. And these were all provided with a contact lead tooling from the foundation. The company up outside Waynesboro sold it, the units to us at friends and family rate, very affordable. And this is the same company that wants to be involved with VMNH Waynesboro by providing in-kind support such as LED lighting for exhibits and operations. So that's this is a nice kind of start to that relationship. On the final page, there's a couple of grants that you want to point out. Monograms is a local company that actually has representation on our foundation. In fact, they are going to be a Jefferson Corporate Award awardee here in March with the Thomas Jefferson Awards. Monogram some years back had started an energy savings method by using waste products developed during their manufacture of snap goods, and then putting that into a digester to create both heat and electricity for their operation. So we thought that was really interesting, and so they're going to be recognized with Thomas Jefferson Awards. They provided through the Monogram Loves Kids Foundation $10,000 for scholarships for Christie's operation. And then related, going back to the ESCO, the Green Energy Program, Siemens provided a power grant of $7,000 worth. Christie is going to be developing SOL-based education programs that will highlight the work being done on the building, in particular the solar. So beyond that, the average, ongoing operations with outreach in the schools starting to slowly come back. Visitation, not so much yet, but Christy and Terry in education have been going out to the schools quite a bit, and of course quite a bit more than previous years. That concludes Christy's report.
I have a question about, in the past, we've been up to Waynesboro and done some educational stuff up there. Are there any plans for the spring to participate in Riverfest or to do any of the kinds of things we've done in that parking lot?
We don't have an off-site festival scheduled right yet. We could look into that if there's a request for it, and certainly Riverfest is something we'll be participating in.
Yeah, because I know there's been a lot of buzz about that skeleton in the library, so
yeah,
I think just keep it in front of everybody there.
Oh yeah. So I don't know what that's going to look like quite yet. That's something we'll plan out here soon. We'll get some participation up there.
I heard Scott mention that they were looking for a topo table, and that's in the report here too. I don't know if that's something you guys are willing to bring up to a festival like that or not.
I looked into that. We have some concerns just
Sure.
due to the sensitivity of the equipment and then all the calibration you have to do. We have enough time to bring it up, set it up, calibrate it, and make it an effective exhibit. And then, of course, there's a lot of effort to bring it back and reset it here. So I saw the look at the staff side. I was well, they would have done it, guaranteed. They would have done it, but it would have been a huge.
I will share that we do have one at JMU, and so it might be able to partner with JMU and move it down, and if somebody from the museum can help interpret it.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, we'll move on into Waynesboro.
Okay. So we have a schedule upcoming, and anyone may participate as they wish, but the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee has been charged with helping the staff procure an architect and engineering firm. So we get to open up envelopes on March 3rd, right? So we do everything by the book. You absorb all of the proposals by March 2nd. We get to open them on March 3rd all at once. We're going to do that in Waynesboro. So we're going to schedule the time that people want to start reviewing them. We'll have an official kind of review session scheduled for the second week of March. I'm talking on the calendar that I've shared, but we can move that to people's schedules. We'll also leave copies up there in the Economic Development Office so people who don't get to participate can review them independently. And so we have 5 people selected as scorers of proposals. That's what the state wants. So one will be me as executive director, Jonathan is Virginia Certified Construction Officer, Tom Benzing from the board, JMU is our construction manager. Greg Hitchen from the city. Will all be doing the scoring. But that said, anybody who wants to sit on interviews with these firms or participate in any way can certainly do so. That said, once everyone has reviewed the proposals and we've identified a top 3, we will very quickly move to have interviews. And again, the state prefers us to have them all in one day. We still hope to get that done in March. And then there's a waiting period. Once you select a firm, you have to announce that if we are awarding this project to such and such a firm, we have to let that sit for about a couple of weeks or so. At that point, we can enter negotiations with the firm. And again, this goes back to the idea we don't make public the amounts that we have. They will then attempt to put forth a project that they think is suitable for detailed design of the VMNH Waynesboro campus. And then if we think it's good, we're good to go. We'll have a lot of help from JMU with the negotiations because they kind of do that every day. And so at that point, we have to negotiate. We could negotiate a proper price. And so I'm hoping by the end of March or thereabouts, we should be done with that in early April. And I hope we get some broad participation in this, but we're going to be requiring that anybody we hire would be willing to send staff down, maybe with some examples of past work that they've done in the museum field to meet with supporters in the Waynesboro, Augusta County region. So, you know, we'll give our VIPs a chance to rub elbows with people who are going to be doing this project. And so all of these entities, JMU's construction manager and the architect and engineering firm, will all be with us through construction and opening. So, do you have any questions on that? We'll keep everyone up to speed, especially the Waynesboro Advocacy Committee itself.
Oh, I didn't have a question about that. Is this an appropriate time?
Yes.
Okay. Joe and I had a conversation yesterday, and I thought this might be an appropriate time to bring it up before the board. Now that Waynesboro is well underway, I think it's time that we start considering the staffing for the building and how that's going to come about. And my concern about this early on is that I have always felt that this museum is understaffed, and anytime there are budget cuts, this museum has suffered mightily in the past. And I would like to see every effort made that you know, if there are dips in the economy, if there are cutbacks, that somehow Waynesboro does not directly impact this institution. I think it's absurd to expect staff of this institution to cover both sides. So I just want to be sure, you know, what's in place, how the building will be operated, the number of full-time positions versus positions, and making sure that we don't find ourselves in a position where that building is having to be managed by people based here.
So to that end, I'd like Jonathan to walk through a business plan. So this started with our feasibility study in 2014. We've since updated it. Frankly said, I think bringing it into a position where it's a lot more realistic and accurate and still very conservative. in terms of expected revenues and realistic in terms of expected expenses.
You guys might be familiar with the first slide.
Can you share the screen? So, the people on Zoom.
I don't know how to do that. It's, I'd rather not actually.
Okay.
There's some numbers in here that.
That's fine. There's no requirement to stream it in these circumstances.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm proud of the slide. I created it on Canva.
Very nice.
All right, so what we do know, right, so there's $1 million coming from the city and in-kind donations as well. The city's also working on the 26-acre wildlife reserve. So the South River Preserve now was Constitution Park. It's right at our front door, so we're excited about having that involved here. And then the, of course, the pre-planning study, $250,000 went toward that. And if anybody's interested online or in the room, those images are available on our website. So hopefully we get some traffic from all of you or someone. So like I said, there's a formula online, so we can get the rough cost estimates here. This is kind of just outlining the process, right? We already completed pre-planning. We're well into detailed planning. So that's bringing on the AE firm to take us through the end of the project. There's schematics. So you're designing room layouts, then preliminary. So you're getting like down to the faucets, the furniture, really into the details. The schematics is where we'll have more input. The pre-planning studies covered a lot, right? But nothing's set in stone yet. So if there's any changes, I think the orientation of the building on the lot, things like that have to happen in detail on. And you go straight to working drawings and construction. See there. Then we go to operation costs. In general, we have the general manager, education support specialist, and then the event specialist for the festivals, which will be a big component, a large component of the funding for this site. Does anybody have any questions?
Could you just go back to the previous slide very quickly?
Would it be possible to get a PowerPoint outline
Oh,
of
absolutely.
the PDF?
I'll fire this over to you.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my question would be in terms of the annual operating, how does that compare to the annual operating of facility here?
Right, so we're roughly $3 million a year. That one, and the operating expenses. So the cost, right? So roughly 500,000 there. Doing the break-even analysis, we can, I guess through the pandemic, we analyzed the numbers, and just to stay afloat, you could do just a director of the museum and then a couple of auxiliary staff to run it. That brings that number well into the 300,000 range. And so the break-even will be 19,000 roughly visitors a year. Currently, based on the fiscal year 20 numbers here at the museum, we have 49,000. So well in the ballpark of running a facility. If we
Just to remind everyone, the estimated, from our feasibility study, the estimated number of people visiting was 63,000 per year. That was, of course, before certain assets had come around, such as the expansion of the South River Preserve and the establishment of the Blue Ridge Tunnel. So we have more draw. And incidentally, right down the road, the Frontier Culture Museum is also going to undergo, don't quote me on this, I think it's going to be a $40 million expansion. It's going to be very significant.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the focus here is more exhibits and then a little bit of education and events. It's not replacing a whole lot of what we're already doing.
there's no 4 curators, there's a lab space that we're looking to have. Quickly,
So
revenues.
those numbers, by the way, those numbers are very comparable to here, scaled to the size operation. And part of the reason the number is so low is that we are basing the staffing model after places like the Danville Science Center down the road. And in fact, just as an incidental, I learned about at the Duke River Gorge in West Virginia on I-64, somewhere east of Beckley, there's a brand new museum that opened there that was just informed of this week. And I'd like to do a road trip there because it sounds like it's very comparable size-wise to our operations. So if anyone wants to go, let me know.
Yeah, so
Where is this located?
East of Beckley Beckley on 60, Beckley, West Virginia on 64, and apparently it interprets one end of the New River Gorge. But that's the information that I got, but I want to see firsthand and hopefully talk to the whoever's in charge.
Which is the newest national park.
Yes, exactly. So it might be a federal operation, which, still could be comparable, but maybe the nuances are slightly different, but we'll find out.
So we can, take these numbers to the tip of the iceberg. There's 3 years estimates cost from here, run in the utility charges of Waynesboro, as well as transportation costs, et cetera. And the accelerated cost of things for the staff in that area. Revenues, quick overview. We can send this out if you guys would like to read that. When this all began, we had a $7 addition here at the museum. I think David Chesbrough came in through the strategic planning and the board here decided to go up to 10. Based on the 65,000 visitors, which is still a conservative estimate. The max.
That's over 1,000 people a week.
Yes.
So more than 200 people a day are going to be in Waynesboro at that facility.
Oh, with all the education, I'm sure
That-
classes coming through.
And that'll be the average because we're going to anticipate reduced draw during the winter time when Blue Ridge Parkway and Skyline Drive are closed. But during high times like leaf peeping events, springtime, people have cabin fever and everything, we anticipate those will be the hot times.
What are our annual visitation numbers here for comparison?
The highest we had prior to pandemic was 43,000.
So what I'm not seeing here is that we are increasing our ask from the Commonwealth. It's all being covered by an increase in revenue.
Jumping ahead of me.
Sorry.
That's all right. So operational financing, we are asking for $200,000 in support, which is in the bill that went with the, that's what last time.
That was suggested by our legislators.
Yes.
So
Okay.
they're basically their reasoning, which is good, is that, if worst case scenario comes, and society starts to crumble, there will always be a little bit of money to make sure that the building does not deteriorate, that it is run, even if it can't be open to the public, that at least it will be cared for until we make a recovery.
Didn't the Senate vote on the budget yesterday?
I think the Senate gets it tomorrow.
Oh.
Yeah. Learning more the next 30 days or so.
Well, it makes sense that if it's a state agency, they would want some skin in the game. Clear that it's them.
It was my nonprofit voice speaking up when I said, what we're going to do is we're going to build something in the Goldilocks zone that's going to be big enough to draw, but not so big that it's a monster to run, and we will run it as a nonprofit, having to raise our funds and so forth. But this also doesn't include, which I hope will be a priority once we get operation going, and be the development of areas or branch specific endowment.
And there's some magic to that $200,000 number. The $200,000 number is based on our operations here, so the visitation at the Virginia Museum of Natural History. So we can support those staff with our visitation, current visitation here with the lower population, South Central Virginia, and with the $200,000 from the legislature, we can have the education staff, we can have the 4 full-time employees for the box office, we can have the special events coordinator. So that 200,000 is there's some magic to it as far as the break-even analysis goes. So we based all that on real numbers. Joe was leading to 43,000 in
Wow.
Correct. So the big sell with the legislature was the yearly savings. So there's geographic expansion without duplication of services. So that was the big win for the state. Myself, fiscal, marketing, purchasing, human resources, security can be run off site. The technical officer that we have to have, scheduling, can all be done from our facility here. This is the budget scenario with the 200,000 added in. And I think 65,000 is a conservative number based on festivals, both in the area and the schools. And the number I came up with was 114,000 guests a year for the facility. And Tom, if you can, the Leaping Festival, was it 20,000?
The fall foliage.
Fall
festival.
foliage.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a strong number. And that's, another big reason why Waynesboro is important to us, because they've done that effort. They've put the years in building building that festival up, and just we're gonna work with them.
If you remember from our last AAM reaccreditation, one of the things, it was very positive overall, but some of the future concerns that were beat out was the need to increase our revenues, just not to be completely reliant on state revenues. We've done that with the festival model, we've done better with grants, corporate partnerships, Brian's efforts and so forth. And then, that was part of the idea of having a branch was, even though this is going to solve all our problems in one building, but again, going back to the board's vision of a natural history experience for all Virginians within an hour's drive, that's going to be a new generation long beyond the existence of this staff and this board, but it's the step towards that realization.
You guys have all heard this before, but within 5 miles of the south entrance to the Shenandoah National Park, and there's how many million people that come out of that entrance every year. So
Yeah.
that's going to be important in our process going forward, is making sure that that partnership is really strong. They're also promoting people coming through the park, going down to the.
And incidentally, just as an aside with all this, I just reached out to the new park superintendent for Blue Ridge Parkway. Her office is in Asheville. So I'm hoping that maybe we can do a trip if somebody's familiar with Asheville, has any connections at Weasel, anything like that. I have none, but we'd like to talk to their team as well, mainly for informational. I mean, we know that the federal government isn't going to have money to give us to support what we're doing. I know the National Park Service, their position is we love healthy communities by our national parks, so they want to be very supportive. But I'm thinking more from the standpoint of, say, them utilizing their social media and sharing our information to the millions of people visiting their facilities.
So the numbers are fun. If anybody wants to just sit with me and we can go on. A lot of there's lots of analysis that went into it, averages and just breakdowns and then break evens and percentages of visitorship, percentage of paying visitorship, percentage. I mean, it's anybody wants to talk about it, I'd be happy to talk about it. So if anybody has any questions?
Thank you for putting this together.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, no problem, no problem. This is good to have too. Just putting this together, legislature, it's always nice to have something that we can.
And he presented a draft of this to the Secretary of Finance in Richmond.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I look forward to seeing the PowerPoint outline too, just to have it.
Oh, absolutely.
That'd be great.
Well, it's good talking points for us too. We should be the ones, knowledgeable about the project. Anybody should have.
Yeah. All right, anything else on Waynesboro advocacy before we move on? Okay, university partnerships.
Okay, the only thing I have to report on that is we're still awaiting colleagues through Howard University and University of Utah and other collaborators, the museum in particular, Adam, Cal, and Nancy are submitting. I have to admit that, Ben, if you see something that I'm missing here, please jump in. But it's an interesting analysis of the holdings of each of these collections. And it's all going to be combined into one large globally accessible database in which it's not just going to be entering in, say, collecting information on fossils, mammals, insects, and whatnot, but there are certain biological traits that they're going to be sharing in sort of this global partnership. And from that, if we are successful through the National Science Foundation to get this multi-institutional grant funded, this will funnel money to our exhibits program, in which we can create in the future an exhibit that parallels the work that the scientists are doing. So, Ben, do you have any further details on the science that they're doing than what I've already talked about?
I think that covers pretty well.
Okay.
Could you list the universities again?
University of Utah and Howard University. Those are the two PI institutions.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
So, and so the idea is that we would create something. We'll do one or two things. We'll either put an exhibit here and create a second exhibit that travels, or create the exhibit here, create it up and travel. So, so that is the spirit of the university partnerships initiative that we started, I think 2 years ago or so. That's where we're at.
Thank you. Strategic planning, back to Joe.
I think we pretty well covered that, Nathan. You know, really what we're doing, don't forget with the retreat. And I may as well kind of talk about, you know, the general idea right now. We will kind of massage this, and we can further, more effectively alter it if people give us scheduling information. But the idea of a 2-year, I'm sorry, the idea of a retreat is at 2 years, our strategic plan to review the 7 points of main emphasis and then modify any of those to go into the final 3 years of the plan. So that's why we've always called these plans 2 plus 3 year plans. So Carol Nash has set us up with a facility called the Hook House, which is something that she worked on to conserve it. And we can also have access to university facilities as well. So we will actually gather in Harrisonburg at JMU according to this initial plan. Sometime in the afternoon, we'll have some kind of optional social activity while people gather. I'm going to propose that we then hold maybe a late afternoon board meeting. But again, I'll take input on what fits people's schedule better. We have dinner, and Art has graciously agreed to, we'll talk about it to have this flipped, but maybe we'll do something like setting up an insect light that will draw various insects that you would not normally encounter because they tend to be nocturnal. And it's a fascinating process that all entomologists love, but it might be interesting for the board as kind of cool social activity. You know, maybe we'll do it the English style. We'll have some tables placed out there with some tea, and with the tea, we will have white milk and brown milk available for addition.
Sounds lovely.
And then the next day, we'll actually start the workshop at the Hook House. So there is a pavilion associated with the Hook House that will house everyone. So as long as we don't have hurricane force winds or something like that, we can actually do it in a nice outdoor setting. Within the Hook House itself, there are 3 facilities that can hold over a dozen people each for breakout sessions. And for those of you who went through this before, there's a format that I learned called the World Cafe format, where we randomize participation in various stations to discuss aspects of the strategic plan, where we're going, the opportunities we have, and challenges, any roadblocks that might be underway. So that's the general idea, with the hopefully done early afternoon or so on Saturday. So Mary Zell will be sharing a version of that upcoming here shortly. And again, we look forward to hearing people's input to massage it to fit as many people's schedule as possible. We already know there's 2 board members who will be traveling during that time, and that's the way it is. But we also have some board members who've already committed to those dates.
So please do let Joe and Mary Zell know before you leave if you're able to attend.
That'd be great if your calendar will allow that.
I'm planning to attend, just I'll put that up there. Any other announcements from anyone?
The last thing, we don't have a nominating committee here, but traditionally in February, a slate is generally read, but I am not officially reading a slate, not as I am not a board member, but I am simply informing you that the intention is that the officers would be replicated for the next fiscal year, as Jennifer has 1 more year beginning July 1st eligible for being president, and the same thing goes for Lisa Carter as vice chair, and then Nathan as secretary, and Roberto as treasurer. So that will be voted on at the retreat during that board meeting as well.
Sounds like it's a good time to have a little extra time to get through all this stuff, especially since we weren't able to take action today. Anything else from anyone before we adjourn?
If you're looking for travel reimbursements, please see me. I can work them out with you. I think I've touched base with everyone already though.
And there's lunches, you can stick around and take one if you want to. If you look forward to hitting the road, please take one with.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Meeting's adjourned.